Hello, everyone. We have some folks still joining us, still logging on. So you can just hold on for just a minute and we will get started. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kelly Cohen, and I am the director of JumpSpark. And I am so excited that there are so many people with us this evening for the kickoff of the virtual college road trip. We know that this is a program that came about because of the uncertain times that we are living in, and there are so many questions in the world around us today. So thank you for joining us all this evening, and maybe we can come to at least some answers for some of the questions that we're all facing at this difficult time. As I said, I'm the director of JumpSpark. JumpSpark is an innovation initiative of the Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta and one of the 10 cities in the Jewish Teen Funder Collaborative. I want to give a thank you to the Federation and to the Teen Funder Collaborative and our partners at Forefront Baltimore, our sister city, for helping to make this all happen. JumpSpark here in Atlanta runs programs for teens, parents of teens, professionals who serve teens, and gives out grants in the community to support the whole Jewish teen ecosystem. The college road trip is a really exciting part of what we are doing, and you can stay up to date with all that we are doing on our website, jumpsparkatl.org, generally, but for this, roadtriptocollege.org, and following us on JumpSpark ATL on Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. We also have a YouTube channel. This webinar is being broadcast live on YouTube Live. So we also have a YouTube channel and a Spotify channel that has our Jump on the Bus playlist that will be updating throughout the month. So please stay up to date with all that we have. I wanted to, as this is our kickoff event, just say a quick word about what we have coming up on the virtual college road trip. This is our kickoff event, as I said. Tomorrow we'll be starting with our virtual college tours, which will happen on our Instagram stories. Tomorrow we'll have Sarah Newberg talking to us about why she chose Tulane. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. we have our information session with Tulane, where we'll have Tulane admissions representative Owen Knight, Hillel representative Josh Hare, and current Tulane student Jordan Schulberg joining us. On Tuesday, June 2nd at 2 p.m., we have a teen and parent webinar, Coping with College Admission in the Time of Corona, with Tulane admissions representative Jeff Schiffman. And also on Tuesday at 5 p.m., we have a teen workshop on College Financial Aid 101 presented by David Cohen, who is the Director of Marketing at JELF, the Jewish Education Loan Fund. As you can see, we have a lot coming up, so please up on our website, roadtriptocollege.org, and on social media at JumpSparkATL to keep up with everything. I am going to hand it off now to Stacy Kay. Stacy Kay is the owner of campus2career.net and is going to be one of our featured authors and moderators throughout this whole experience. She works with college students and college graduates to move them from college to career and help them with their networking and job skills. And we are honored to have her as our moderator for this panel. So I'm going to pass Stacy now. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us as part of the virtual college road trip.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everybody. First, welcome and thank you for taking time out on a Sunday to join us. We've got a great program for you. I would like to invite you at the bottom of your Zoom, if you're on a laptop, there's a Q&A section. And so if you do have questions that you want to ask either of our speakers towards the end of the program, I'll be moderating the Q&A section, and we'd love to have our panelists answer your questions. In today's workshop, Rick Clark and Brendan Bernard will help frame the college admission experience for your family. They'll discuss ways to keep perspective, ask good questions, and actually grow closer along the way. As practicing professionals, they will provide tips and insights that they've learned by doing this work consistently, and will share their thoughts on what approaching the college search and selection journey a healthy, unified way looks like. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Rick Clark is the Director of Undergraduate Admissions in Atlanta's own Georgia Tech. And Brennan Barnard is the Director of College Counseling and Outreach at the Derryfield School, which is an independent school in high school in New Hampshire. And he's also the he's also college admissions program advisor with the Making Caring Common project at Harvard Graduate. Together, they are the co-authors of the book, The Truth About College Admission, a family guide to getting in and staying together. Welcome to Rick and Brennan. I'm just going to ask you to unmute. Great. Here we go.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Stacy, thanks so much, and Kelly as well. We're excited to be part of this, and definitely excited to kick it off, or I guess since it's a road trip, start up the engine and get people out on the road, which looks like a great one. I mean, so many of our friends that you have lined up. I mean, hearing about Jeff Schiffman, and I saw a couple other of the sessions that you have lined up, and you've done an amazing job. So I know these families are really going to benefit from that. And also, we're pleased to join you virtually. Last year, I had the opportunity in the fall to come out and do a similar program. So really appreciate the continued involvement. We're looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to taking your questions. We just have about 15 or 20 minutes of kind of kickoff slides just to start the conversation, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna let Brennan take it away.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rick. It's really exciting for us. I mean, first of all, I'd love to be on that in that van. First of all, I mean, that's pretty cool. And it's really great to be part of kind of the kickoff to this whole series, because I think as we think about approaching this experience of college admission, and I don't know, Rick, if you want to go to the next slide there, we really, and bonus points if you know who Tom Kubis is, and if you want to throw it in the question and answer, the chat, if you know who he is, that's great. No Googling. And I didn't know until I heard this quote and looked it up. So and I think I actually heard this quote for the first time. I think Rick had used it, and it just really spoke to me. This idea of you don't have to do this, you get to do this. And it's such a great way to frame the beginning of this experience, the beginning of this road trip for you, the beginning of kind of the college exploration, in thinking about it as not something that happens to you. So too often students and families kind of go into college admission with this idea that, oh, here we go. This is going to be some really stressful process, and we need to. This is kind of happening to me. I'm going to have to endure this. But we really would love you to think about this as you begin this journey. To think about it as this idea of you get to do this, and to approach it with gratitude. In fact, I don't know. We'll see how this works virtually. We do this a lot when we talk to folks in person. But what we'd like everyone to do right now, if you're watching this with your student, if you're watching this as a family together, you can do this right now, or you can, if you're a student watching this and your parents in the other room, or a parent watching this, your students in the other room, you can just yell it out to them. Okay, so just take 1 minute and do this one practice. Okay. So if you're a student, I want you to turn to your parent or yell to the next room and just say these 3 words, right? I love you. Go ahead. Yell it out. All right, great. And then these 2 words. Ready for this? Thank you. Go ahead. Okay. So students, your parents are your biggest fans, right? And they are, in many cases, or your family or whoever, your caretaker, they are the people that are going to be on your side and have your back. And they are, in many cases, the ones who are enabling you to do this. And so if you can approach this with gratitude for everything they're giving you, and everything they provided you and the opportunities that you have, it's going to be a much more meaningful experience. And now, parents, it's your turn. Okay, if your child's in the other room, you can yell it out to them, or you can always just say it later. But these couple words, all right? I love you. Go ahead. I know you say it all the time, but you can say it again. They never get too sick of it. Okay, I can hear people screaming it all over Atlanta. All right. So, and now this phrase, I'm proud of you. Okay. All right. So, parents, this is just a reminder, and Rick and I are both parents. We both each have a son and a daughter, and it's something it's a practice I've tried to get into more and more. Thanking my children for just random things, right? Like, we have a lot of expectations as parents. We just kind of, especially in this moment when we're kind of all stuck in the same house, often we forget to be grateful, grateful for the time we have together and for this experience. And we also, at least I, forget to tell my children, as much as I should, how proud I am of them, and how much faith I have in them, in what they're going to do with their lives. And it doesn't have to be anything monumental, but it's just it's a really good opportunity to stop as you get on the bus here, to start your journey, to express gratitude, and to think about all the people maybe who don't get to do this, right? And that you have a real privilege going into this, if you're starting this college journey. And so to look at it with a sense of agency and a sense of choice, that you are able to, you decide where you apply to college, and you decide what you put into your application, and you decide what you do in high school. And so these are all decisions that you have, that you get to do, not that you have to do. And sometimes it feels like the expectations of colleges kind of dictate everything. But I think if you can approach it from this sense of empowerment rather than kind of being put upon, I think it's really really powerful. So the next thing is a question, and it's a very simple one. And it's the question you should ask before you even rev up the engine or get in the bus, staying with this metaphor, right? So, and there's lots of questions you could ask as you head into this experience of applying to college. But in our book, we kind of frame this out as the fundamental question. And if you've read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, it's a great book. The whole idea of starting to look at schools, too often folks start with where, right? Where am I going to go to school? Or how am I going to get in? Or what do I need to do to get in? Or, is it this school? Is it that school? People are throwing suggestions out before you even have thought about going to school. But we really encourage folks to stop and say, why am I doing this, right? Like, why am I going to college? What do I want out of the experience? And if you can really articulate for yourself that why, and share that as a family, and discuss your why and your parents' why do they want you to go to college? Why do you want your children to go to college? And students, why do you want to go to college? It's the first question I ask every student I sit with to do college counseling. Well, the first question is, do you want to go to college? And I mean, they're there to see the college counselor, so usually the answer is yes. And then I ask why, and a lot of times that really stumps them. They kind of look at me with their kind of eyebrows furled and say, what do you mean? Like, because it's expected, and of course I'm going to college. And but so often students haven't stopped to think about what they want and and really identify that for themselves. And if you can come back to that question throughout the experience, every time you get on and off that bus, you will have a much more meaningful and focused college search that gets you to a good place. So with that, I will turn it over to Rick. We're really hoping that this time together today, really after we say a few words, that will really be driven by your questions. We want to see what's on your minds, and as you start the journey, and so please start actively asking questions once Rick finishes up.
Yeah, and I mean, just before I move on, I'd also say, as someone that works on a college campus and works alongside college students every day, those that give tours and answer calls and work in our office and this kind of thing, that answer to why is important, especially in the first year, because I think most students, I would say high percentage of students, end up questioning, did they make the right choice? No matter what school they go to. Last year, I did a quick survey of our tour guides on this, and like 75% of them said that yes, at some point they questioned if they had made the right decision at the school that they ended up attending. And I think if you can come back to that touchstone, if you can come back to why, it is going to serve you, not just, as Brennan said, throughout the college admission experience and selection process, but also into college as well. Write it down, voice record it, put it on your phone, wherever you're going to come back to it. Do that, because it really is incredibly helpful. It helps you filter through a lot as you make these decisions. I think right now, especially given coronavirus and given so much of the chaos that's happening in our country with the riots and the protests, it's important to talk about that honestly, about the fears that we have, about the anxieties that we have, about the uncertainties that we have. But I also think it's important that we talk about the hopes as well. And we don't leave that out, that it's not just the darkness, but it's also the light that we lean into. And so that's really all I want to talk about for a couple minutes, is some of my hopes for you, my hopes for your family as you go through this process. And Brennan and I write a lot about this in our book. But ultimately, having each been in this world for well over 2 decades now, that's what we see, is that this can come between families, but there's real opportunity here. And so I want to challenge you on a couple things and give you a couple hopes that I have for you before we turn it over. The first is simply your language, and the language that you use as you go through this. If you read in the press, and if you hear admission people like myself talk when they come to your school, or now doing virtual programs, you hear a lot about the admission process. And if you go to Google Images and you put in the word process, this is what you get. You get a lot of cogs of the wheel, you get a lot of mechanical looking things. And I feel like this is very inaccurate. This is not how the admission experience should go. Because if you look at it like a process, there's like an equation, there's a certain systematic, formulaic way to progress. And the goal is, starting, you're a red person, right? At this point, you're just this red guy on this cog of the wheel. And the goal is to ultimately move progressively through and end up being that, blue and purple guy at the end, right? So I would challenge you on that. I would say that, this is not the right way to look at it. A process makes you feel like you're on the tightrope. If you don't get a certain GPA, if you don't take all the right classes, if you don't demonstrate the appropriate interest at the right time to the right admission person, if your essay has a comma splice, if you don't make the certain test score, then you're going to fall off and you are totally screwed. And this whole thing, the wheels are coming off the van. Forget the road trip. You are just like on the side of the road with AAA coming and you're going nowhere, right? That's a process. It is a tightrope. It is this systematic way. You don't do it like your brother or sister did it. You don't do it like your neighbor did it. You don't do it like someone else that you knew. Well, that's wrong. You're supposed to do it this particular way. I would challenge you on that. I would say that I hope, and Brennan and I really hope together, that you'll stop using the word process and you'll change that to say experience. The college admission experience, and we're really intentional about this, because if you Google image experience, what you get is a lot of boats in the water, a lot of, people up on high places looking out over valleys. And there's a lot of ways to navigate. There's a lot of ways to get down from that cliff and through the river and across the way. And there's a lot of places you could go versus that, mechanical wheel, right? Where it has to be from one thing to the next. And there's no way to skip. There's no way to come out. You've got to go from one to the next. Something gets rusted, something gets put in the middle, and you're falling off that tightrope. But this way, you're choosing. You're getting to navigate your own way. You're going down a much more broad boulevard, and you can do that a lot of ways. You got people riding bikes, you got people on hoverboards, you have people on motorized vehicles, you have people walking. There's a lot of ways to go about this, and that would be my first challenge and hope for you, is that you'll strike process and move to experience. All right, so my next one is this idea of breadth, of keeping your arms open. So if you will put in chat some of your answers here, I'll be kind of curious to see these. But I got a couple questions for you, and I just want to be really clear in saying no prizes. All right, we're not going to mail you anything, not going to email you anything, not really even going to cheer for you at all if you get this right. Similarly, though, we're not going to disconnect you if you get stuff wrong, not going to publicly out you either. So throw out a couple of your answers here. How many colleges or universities in the United States? And I don't want to click on the chat because I might, come off of my share screen.
I'm there. All
right, let me know if you have anything. By the
way, we're talking 4-year colleges and universities.
4-year, 2-year, public, private. Just be curious to know what some of the people's answers might be here.
All right, we got 3,400, 4,900.
Okay.
400, 7,000, 1,800.
Yep. All over the map on that. That's great. And I hope nobody's using
4 million.
4 million. Good.
4 million.
Around 4,000 total. Possibly around 3,000 of those being 4-year schools, but a wide spectrum. And I will say this about COVID. One of the upsides has been you're seeing more schools out there quoted. You're seeing, what they're saying about how coronavirus is impacting publics or privates or 2-year schools, or how it's impacting different parts of the country. And so I think that's really important because it reminds us that you have a lot of choices. You have a lot of options. When you are confined and when things are narrow, when people tell you there's only this many schools or these are the only ones you can apply to, if you're only looking at the ones you're familiar with, that is the tightrope, that is narrow. And our challenge to you is to stay broad. Another question I have real quick is, of those colleges, and let's just say of the 3,000, how many do you think admitted 25% or less? So again, their admit rate is about a quarter. I can say for Georgia Tech, we'd be considered one of these schools. We're admitting this year around 21% of applicants. So how many schools kind of like Georgia Tech do you think are out there? Ballpark number or percentage is fine. We can calculate.
Okay. We're going with numbers. We have 150,
okay.
25%, 1,000, 200, 870, 500, 200.
Yeah. Nice. I like the specificity of some of those. That's
50,
great.
50. I don't know if that's 50% or 50 schools. 57.
Right. Answer being about 100, around 100 of these schools, right? Taking 25%, but that is certainly not the narrative. The concept is, and what you hear a lot is, oh my gosh, it is so hard to get into college. And that's why, you read a lot about the Ivy League schools. You read a lot about Stanford, right? You read about these places that are known to be highly selective. That's what, journalists like to write about. The kind of rule one of journalism is if it bleeds, it leads, right? So they write about Stanford that's got a negative 0.083 admit rate. They actually email kids that didn't apply and deny them. Kid just is like, what? I didn't even apply. All right, so what about of that, including Stanford's negative admit rate here, so here's the thing, you love diagonals, all right? You're from the Southeast, you just want to go to the Northwest. You like to wear shirts that have patterns with diagonals. You sometimes walk sideways, and geographically, you want to go diagonally across the country. to somewhere like Oregon or, Washington. So the Pac-12, some of these schools, what do you think the median admit rate is of those excellent schools?
What percent of all their students do they admit? All their applicants?
Yep. 100 people apply. What percentage of those are getting in?
Okay, we got 30%, 63%, 50, 40, 60, 45%, 20%, 30%, 35, 50. Do I hear 60? I could be an auctioneer.
You could, man.
20, 20,
You could.
15, 50, 50.
And especially online auctioning, not
Do I hear
easy.
50? We have 40.
And look, they're at taking almost 3/4 of the students to apply, and the national average
at 74.
the national average is right around 67%. So the truth is that not only do you have a lot of options, 4,000 plus in the U.S. alone, but most schools taking most students. And let me say this. Especially right now and heading into the next few years, not just because of coronavirus, but also because of this sort of birth dearth of 2008 and 2009, schools are going to be admitting more students than they have in recent years. I can say that for us. I mean, we've admitted well over 1,000 more students this year than we did last year. And that is true of what I'm hearing from my colleagues as well. All kinds of reasons for that, whether they be financial, whether that be because they're worried international students can't get visas, whether that be because they're trying to backfill for students they think might not return. I would say that broadly speaking, it will be easier to get into college next year than it was this year. And it is absolutely, quote, easier to get into college this year than it was last year. So that is a trend that I expect to continue for a variety of demographic reasons. Let me move on real quick and see if I can advance. This is my son. I'm not going to go into the long story about this, but it took place in Piedmont Park. And if you are a movie fan, especially of classic films, you know that he is impersonating Rafiki from The Lion King 1.5, classic, of course. Put that on your queue. And basically, I came around the corner to find him there. This is, again, magnolia tree, 8 feet up, 8 feet out. Dude shimmied this thing in a sweater vest, which I find impressive. And he says, "Look beyond what you see." And, at the time, I just thought, man, that kid is really super odd. Honestly, a lot like his mom. And also, like, possibly a prophet here. And I think that this is one of my hopes. In addition to your language, I hope you will keep a broad, perspective, that you'll remember how many options you have and how many schools are admitting lots of students, that getting into college itself is not that difficult, that when stuff comes to you in the mail, that just because you haven't heard of it, you won't throw it out, that when someone comes to visit your high school or someone's hosting an online virtual program, like, you won't discount it just because you haven't heard of it or someone else that hasn't gone there, but you'd come back to your why, as Brennan said. I'm going to close with this, just a couple last hopes. And this is for parents and for students, keeping the goal in mind. And I do understand that Miguel Almiron no longer plays for Atlanta United. And I don't want to talk about that because there's enough darkness and sadness in the world right now. But here are my big hopes for you. Number one, for parents, I would say this. Parents of high school students should talk to less parents of high school students about college admission. You should be talking to parents of college students and parents of recent college graduates, because what they will say inevitably is, it worked out. We found a place where our son or daughter is happy. We love to go visit there. Never thought that she would end up there, but actually has this internship now, is dating a guy we actually like. Things are good. It wasn't even on her list initially. It wasn't her first choice. All of these different parts of their story that end up with, we are so thankful for the way it worked out. That is the common refrain. The other thing is that I want you to change your language and not saying anymore that X school is my first choice or my top choice. I hope that you will say, you know what? There were 4,000 schools in this country that I could have chosen to apply to. I chose 8 or 9 that I applied to. I got into 5, right? And I am thrilled with every one of them. My neighbor recently was talking about how she got into the University of Tennessee, and she said, but it's only the University of Tennessee. And I thought, what are you talking about? You chose to apply there. Of all the schools in the country, you chose just a couple to apply to. You should be thrilled. And as Brennan said, like, you have the opportunity to go to college. It is not just any school. It is all these places that you get chosen. And one thing I'd like you to be reminded of is just some basic math, and that is this. Admission is a 3-part process. 1/3 of it is where you choose to apply. You control that. You get to apply to wherever you want. 1/3 you do not control. That's the admission side, right? That's people like me and committees and rooms you'll never walk into, making decisions that have all kinds of background noise around them. And you can't control that. And then on the other end of it, that last third is back up to you. You have a couple choices. That was your goal to begin with. And you end up with options and choices of places you chose to apply to. You should be going out to dinner. You should be high-fiving. You should be celebrating that. And then lastly, and Brennan hit on this already, but how is greater than where. How you end up is far more important than where you end up. It is not about the statue you take a picture in front of or the gate that you walk into, but how you have grown through the admission process, what you've learned about yourself and your family as well, how you guys have done this together.
I'm glad you explained that middle one there on that last slide, Rick, because it looked like 51 choices.
Oh, okay, my bad. Yeah,
well, that's a big
right.
app list.
No doubt. Well, we're going to come off of the presentation real quick. I just wanted to share a couple, ways to get in touch with us. We're always happy to hear from you, and just a couple quick resources, which maybe Stacy and Kelly will share later. But I'm going to come out of here and just go into our Q&A section.
Wow, I got to tell you guys, I've got one daughter who's a rising sophomore in Indiana, and another who's a rising junior at a private high school in Atlanta. And your advice is amazing. And my second child's going to benefit more, but isn't that always the case? The second child gets better everything except hand-me-downs. Okay, I want to switch to Q&A. And again, I'm seeing only one question in the Q&A, but we've got some questions that you guys, the audience, submitted beforehand. So my first question, from the college and high school side, what are some of the things you see come between families in this college admission experience? And how can those watching tonight stay unified and healthy during this stressful time?
That's a great question. Rick, maybe I'll start with that one and you can add on. So this is true anytime, but especially true in this moment where we are all staying at home together. The college admission experience, again, experience, not process, but the college admission experience can be one that is all consuming if you let it be, right? So as much as you can start from the beginning, we talk in the book about these kind of wedges of college admission and kind of things that get in between families and work against family unity. And one is time and another's communication and money. But the setting aside time to talk about college will lead to a healthier family life, especially now in this moment, because with some families it gets into this kind of back and forth where every conversation becomes around college, starting like junior year or maybe before in some families. And, you pass your parent on the way to the bathroom or, going down to breakfast or something like that. And everything is about college. Can you pass the waffles? And, oh, did you look into that college I suggested you? Can you help me, get the stuff out of the car? Oh, and have you signed up for the SATs, right? It becomes just part of every conversation. And so if you can, as a family, kind of build some guidelines into it about how much you're going to talk about school, it will save, it will create a lot of harmony. So like maybe set aside every Sunday night, or maybe to begin with every other Sunday night. And you just set aside an hour, and that's gonna be our hour to talk about college. And parents, everybody kind of comes and they're super open. This means kids, you have to actually talk to your parents and explain what you've been doing. And parents, you have to listen to your children, and everybody has to stay open-minded. If you can build a practice out of that, I think that's really important, really dedicating that time to that. So that's just one tip. Rick, do you want to build on that?
Yeah. Mine would be, and like Brennan said, we talk about this in the book, these wedges, and it's because both of us in our work see exactly what you're describing, Stacy, where, there's a rift and a division rather than a coming together. And that's heartbreaking, and it's avoidable, and right now I can say, if I'm not going to do this, but if I shared my email with you, I could show you a lot of examples of another wedge, which is money. And what I would say is that a lot of you all, that are sophomores and juniors rising, potentially rising juniors and seniors, a big thing is to talk about money early and to be really honest about it. And especially right now where, unemployment is a really high rate. People that own small businesses are suffering. And I mean, as a state employee, we're about to take furloughs, right? Everybody's got a different story around, money and how it's impacting the family. And I think that parents don't give kids enough credit for what they can take in and understand. We shortchange our kids and we don't educate them well enough about some basic things. And it takes being vulnerable, and it takes being open and honest to say, let me help you understand how we pay for the life you know. Here is how much our mortgage costs. Here are how much insurance and cars and the second home or whatever we have. Now, look, yes, we could pay this amount, but this is what that would mean us sacrificing. Well, no more vacations. I'm working till I'm 74, all of these other kind of things. And if you talk to kids about that, it doesn't mean you cannot apply to these schools. It just means that here's their price tag. And that if there's not some kind of financial aid, scholarship, or other need-based aid that comes in to bring that cost down to X, then that's not going to be okay. And what I see is that parents often won't do that. And in April, when these financial aid packages hit, it's the first time the kid has gotten admitted. They did all the work to get in. They posted it on social media. They bought the hoodie, right? They told everybody they're going there. And now mom and dad are saying, actually, we can't afford that, right? And this year's a little different because things spun in a very different way. But in normal years, that is sort of what happens. And this year in particular, I could pull up 12 emails right now about people who are saying, we want it to work, but we just can't make it work. And not all of those are because of changes in finances, right? So, I would just say there is a real opportunity right now during this coronavirus pause to talk before an application is ever submitted, honestly, about what you can. And we talk about this in the book too, like it's very reasonable to put some conditions in place. Well, look, we live in Georgia. We have some great public options. We're willing to pay what it costs to go to a Georgia school for any school in this country, and plus 5,000, plus 8,000, whatever, but no more than that. If the student knows that before they apply, that is a fine condition. Just don't put that condition on later in the cycle. And so that's kind of my big thing about a wedge, or something I hope families will think about, is being vulnerable and honest about money and how that plays in. The difference between what we can afford and what we're willing to pay are very different things.
Oh, you're muted, Stacy.
Thank you. I thought I unmuted. Thank you. That's really great. We've got a number of questions here, so let's see how many we can get through. What do I need to be focusing on now with my 11th grader this summer and fall?
Yeah, I mean, right now, again, this is a different year, but right now it's really finishing strong, finishing the year strong, and putting together a course program for next year that's going to be challenging, and that's going to show colleges, no matter what school looks like next fall, that they're staying engaged, and they have a strong course program for next fall. And then really just starting to explore and reach out to schools. Like I think Rick was saying earlier, there are tons of virtual events, more than ever. I mean, that's the one benefit from this whole thing, is that there's always been online resources and things like that, but schools have kind of blown up the offerings. And so really go and do those, and those virtual events. Go, make a practice of it. Take 2 afternoons every week, and set those aside for doing the virtual tour and information session at a school. And what I've been suggesting to families is, and to students is, one of those 2 visits you do every week should be a school that you're really excited about and you want to learn more about. And the other should be a school you've never heard of, or you've never even considered, or somebody recommends to you. So you just, again, expand your options. You might find a school that you're really excited about. But whatever you do, engage with schools now, and find ways to show that you're interested and that you're engaging with them.
Brendan, that's great, because I'm coaching kids and trying to help them figure out what to do this summer that's meaningful and relevant to make them look like a rock star for next year's summer internships. And watching as many videos as you can about these colleges now. I mean, all we have is time, a lot of time. Forgive me, I don't mean to cut you off, Rick, from answering, but I just want to get through all these great questions. What effects do you believe COVID may have on admissions and/or the admissions process for next year's seniors?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have?
30 seconds.
Okay, all right. Well, one of the biggest certainly is the continued test score optional, trend. And so one resource that I would give people is fairtest.org, FAIR test.org. There in the top nav, there's a test optional list where they're keeping track of all the schools. And just recently, this started decades ago, mainly it's just sort of kind of cascaded down from Maine, over the last couple decades. But in recent weeks, you've seen more and more publics, the whole UC system, all of the Oregon publics, just recently Rutgers, UConn, so publics, privates. I used to work at Wake Forest University. Here in the South, we've got plenty on each side. I know for a fact right now, the University System of Georgia has a review of, test score optional. Whether or not that'll pass remains to be seen, but it could happen. So I would say that is one thing, is that testing will be de-emphasized in the year ahead. Even for schools that continue to require tests, I think they're going to de-emphasize the use of tests because they are not the same as they were. And a lot of them have not been validity tested, as well. Plus the administration, the length of time, security around that. I mean, there's so many reasons why I think you're going to see tests de-emphasized. And then the last, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, Rick, I just want to, I want to hear more things about COVID, but we have a question related to, do you think for test optional, if a student doesn't submit their score, are they at a disadvantage? Or if they don't submit test scores?
Yeah, Brennan can maybe talk to this because he works with students and he sees admission results. But, with my colleagues that are test score optional, always say, it means just that. Send them or don't. It
really does. I mean, if you have scores that are above a school's profile, they can only help you. But when a school is test optional, they really are test optional. And I've been doing this for the last 2 months during COVID. I've been doing this Thursday night webinar series, and 3 colleges each week of very different, from all over the country, and different levels of selectivity. And most of them have gone test optional. And we've been asking that question, and to a T, they'll all say, you know what, especially this year, we get it.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you see with regard to COVID happening for next year's seniors?
So the other thing that, not only would I say, but my colleagues, I'm on a number of listservs. I'm on a listserv for public flagships around the country. I'm on a listserv called Cache, which is STEM-leaning schools around the country. And everyone is basically saying there's a huge asterisk on this junior spring. I mean, like, not to say we're not going to look at it at all, but we're going to be a lot more intent on what did the student take and what could they have taken versus maybe the grade, because a lot of schools did go pass fail. A lot of schools gave a student the last grade they had before entering into remote learning. And a lot of schools and students just understand, like, I mean, everybody went into different circumstances. I have a colleague who lives in East Cobb, right? And since a lot of people are from Atlanta, they know that area. It's a pretty affluent area. I mean, her son and daughter were both home from college, and they had major issues with their internet service when these students were trying to take some of their exams. So even in places, it's not always just about like students going back to unfriendly home environments. It was also just about the access to, solid, consistent internet. So admission officers are going to be taking that into consideration. They are putting a huge asterisk on that junior spring and giving benefit of the doubt to this summer. And we've also had this conversation. I was in an online conference, which was brutal. Online conferences should never exist, of colleges this last week. And we were all saying the same thing, which is we're just going to assume that if a kid plays club soccer and played high school soccer and last year went to a soccer camp and did X, they would have done the same thing this summer. They just can't, right? And the good news is nobody can do anything anyway. But the benefit of the doubt and sort of the assumption would be whatever it is they're into, they would have continued that.
Well, and I'll just add to that, Rick, that the Common App has added a question for students to specifically list how this COVID and any other disaster has affected them, how it's impacted them. And it's not just those things that they always do. Some students were really looking forward to an internship this summer, or they were looking forward to some experience, or they were going to be taking over the leadership in a club that that now they're not able to do, or so colleges again are going to give the benefit of the doubt, and as long as students are honest and ethical about the way they respond, they can list those things so that they can express their intent to do those things.
Brendan, that's really good. I didn't know that the Common App had added that question. That's great.
Yeah, and they actually added a similar question for high school counselors, so that counselors can also talk about how it's impacted the students. So that's another thing for students. Get to know your counselor and communicate well with your counselor about what you want them to share with the colleges.
I want to switch now to gap year. I've had a lot of friends of mine say, oh, if school doesn't open up, my kid's going to go to a gap year instead of starting freshman year. So someone wrote a question, will college admission be more difficult if there are more people opting for a gap year this upcoming year and then attending when they would be a freshman? Concurrently, is there a limit to how many students can do a gap year program at each institution?
Yeah, again, the answer is it depends, right? Like it is for everything in college admission. But again, I've been asking that same question in this webinar series every week, and it really varies on based on colleges. Like this last 2 nights ago or whatever, Thursday, we had Wesleyan University and also Wellesley College, and the dean at Wesleyan said we're not capping it. We're not going to limit the number of kids who can defer. And Wellesley said, yeah, we have to. So we're going to do that. So people should check with the schools that they're applying to. And Rick, you can add to this, but I don't think it's going to significantly, and everything I've been talking to deans about, it's not going to significantly impact this year's juniors, the class of 2021, in terms of how selective it's going to be, because colleges are going to shift things, and it's not going to be a huge concern. And I also don't think we're going to see as many students taking gap years as the media has hyped it up to be. I think some of those have been based on very limited studies and surveys of people. And because what are you going to do in a gap year, right? If you can't go to college, what are you going to do? You might as well, if you're going to be sitting at home, might as well be taking classes and working towards your degree.
Brendan, you should put the link to those Thursday night, chats.
That.
I mean, he's had some amazing guests on.
Yeah, the recordings. There's recordings from the past ones too. I'll put it in.
We can also be sure to send that out.
Some great conversations.
Again, I've got one kid in college, one not. Two questions people have about college interviews. Do college still do interviews? My kid would still love to talk to admissions. And then in our questions today, what are some good questions to ask in an online interview because we aren't seeing the school? So first, are colleges doing interviews in general?
Brennan?
Yeah. Most colleges that were doing interviews are doing interviews. A lot of colleges have started to move away from interviews just because of the sheer volume. But it's interesting because everybody's working from home and because of Zoom and everything like that. Some schools actually have more bandwidth to do interviews now because the college admissions officers aren't traveling around to high schools and college fairs and things like that. So they are offering interviews. So again, go to the admissions site at each school and check that and see what they're saying. But I think even the schools that aren't offering official interviews are more willing this year to kind of talk one-on-one with students and have them reach out to them. And some of the questions, interview questions, and we have a whole section on this in our book, but it's the kinds of questions you should be asking. It should be coming out of that question of why, right? Like, what's the experience you want to have? Why are you going to school? And that should be guiding the questions you're asking them. It shouldn't be, do you have a biology major, right? Like, it shouldn't be stuff you can just look up online. They should be questions like, what's the student culture here? What do people do on the weekends? What's the relationship between students and professors? How does that work? What's something, asking the admission officer, what's something you would change if you could change anything about Georgia Tech? What would you change? So there's just a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add two things. One, I have heard more colleges talk about the possibility of interviews going forward, especially as test score optional continues to be a trend. And to the point of what Brennan mentioned earlier, that if we are not traveling and if we are not going to be able to do tours and not going to be able to do a lot of the things we normally do, this is an option. Maybe not for every student, but there's some third parties now coming in that are showing that they can probably handle some of the volume issues. The only last thing I want to say to students, especially because some of these will happen this summer. A lot of schools will start to offer interview options this summer. Honestly, a person like me, I've interviewed for schools, I've interviewed for scholarships, like, we really don't want to interview you. We want to have a conversation. And so I think that's another paradox change in your mind of just process versus experience. It's not an interview. It is a conversation. So what Brennan said earlier, of them saying, well, what do you hope this place will be in 5 years? And what are the things that surprised you when you first got here? Those are great questions to ask. It becomes a conversation. And then the last thing I want to say is, before you go into that interview, you need to videotape yourself responding to some questions. Watch how you use your hands. Watch how and listen back to how your voice sounds. You can learn so much about the exchange based on that. It's uncomfortable, but really helpful.
Yeah, I'm actually putting in the chat a link to this, a third party, which is called Initial View. And they have a platform. They do interviews for schools, and they have a paid service, but you can also, they have this kind of elevator pitch thing that you can record yourself. And it's really kind of cool interactive. So that's something to practice interviews.
Yeah, their CEO is actually from Atlanta.
I love how you've reframed so many things, even what you just talked about. There was an earlier question of what advice can you give for a student and or his or her parents that's really bright, he gets great grades, but he's not sure if he wants to go to college. And I think that was talking more about the why before. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm a big proponent of taking a gap year, first of all, in regular times. I think if a student's not ready, maybe they shouldn't go to college right away. And maybe they should take some time to explore some of the things they think they might be interested in studying in college to get a sense for whether that's really something they want to go into. I guess I would have a real conversation about if you don't want to go to college, are you running towards something or are you running away from something? And so I think as you ask that question of why, I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, I read a great essay the other day from a young lady who is about to graduate online from Penn State, and she chose this 4 or 5 years ago. And during this time, she went to a private school in Atlanta. And during this time, she's lived in multiple countries, she's lived in different cities, and she's kind of continued during that time to take courses along the way. And for her, that was really the right choice. The one thing I would say is, depending on what you think you have an interest in, don't lose your skills. So, if you don't want to go right away, that's fine. But if you think you might pursue something in science or engineering, and this is sort of the life I live in language, you have to find ways to continue to keep that up if your intent is later to go back.
That's great. Another reframing, Brennan, of that question. I think I'm going to make this the last question. I'm looking at my watch here. Someone says, as a parent of 2 rising seniors, how hands-off should I be during the college admissions experience? And I like how she used the word experience.
Right. Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it's the answer is different for every family, right? I think I would recommend to the most degree you can to take the lead from your children and what they're showing you. I mean, I think some families need to be a little more hands-on depending on the child, but I would really, I think most important is to have those conversations about what role you're going to play. So sit down and have a conversation, parents and students, about like whose job is this, whose job is that. Am I going to be building the list, and am I going to be if school's open back up, and am I going to be setting up the visits and things like that, and just kind of articulating that, because that takes a lot of the guesswork out of how hands-on you should be.
Rick, anything you want to add to that?
In presentations, and the way that I try to use a metaphor on this is, this idea of a boat, right? And the family's on a boat together, and they're ideally going to the same port, and they're ending up walking off the deck happy with the journey, right? And you can't, only one person can hold the wheel at a time. And I think for parents that this goal, we talk about this at Georgia Tech a lot in our orientation, that you really should be moving and using this admission experience to move from parent to partner. All right. And it's a subtle but really important shift. And I think it starts with the wheel, where you say, I'm going to now climb up into the crow's nest, and I'm looking out and I'm calling out some things I see with my perspective and my experience and my network of people to say, I see a shoal there. I see an iceberg there. The kid is still saying, I want to go check this out. I want to, look into this. I'm really excited about this. That's awesome. That's what you want. Let me just offer a little perspective that you're not going to see. But this idea of slapping hands off the wheel or fighting for the wheel, I mean, that's another wedge. And I think there is an opportunity to make that move from parent to partner, and it starts in the admission experience.
But don't go down with the ship.
We know how that ends. I just want to reiterate, they are the co-authors of the book called The Truth About College Admission, a family guide to getting in and staying together. Can't thank both of you enough. As Kelly said before, this will be available on YouTube, and I know JumpSpark will do a great job of sharing those links. And if you have friends or other family members that you think would value listening to this webinar, we encourage you to share that. So thank you, Rick and Brennan, especially on a Sunday. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Be well and stay well.
Thank you.